All right, it is the Week 4 edition of the Ari Meirov NFL show. Joined again here by PFF's Brad Spielberger. Brad, thanks for coming on again. Before I even get started, Brad, I got to start with this. It blows me away that we're going into Week 4. We're through 3 weeks, and there are only 2 3-0 teams and 1 0-3 team. Like, the parity in the league right now is in a pretty good spot, I would say.
Yeah, that's a great point, especially considering, teams were trying to do the opposite this offseason. There were a lot of teams trying to become elite and a lot of teams kind of recognizing they were not good and maybe trying to be bad in a hurry. But yeah, to the point of the 2 3-0 teams, I think the Miami Dolphins, the 72 Miami Dolphins, those guys are going to be partying and popping the champagne pretty early this year.
Do you think so? Are we already writing the Dolphins off? We're giving them a loss already for Thursday night? Where are we going over here?
I might go so far as to say I'll give them a loss on Thursday night. And then Philly, they have an easy schedule. They actually have our easiest schedule remaining in the NFL. So maybe a little bit longer for them. But nevertheless, I think those old geezers will be popping bottles real soon.
They probably will. I would agree with you. I don't think anybody had on their bingo card the Dolphins and Eagles being the last 2 undefeated teams in the NFL. I want to start actually on the opposite side. I want to start with the winless teams or the struggling teams. Let me go to the Raiders first. I mean, there was so much hype and excitement and so many new pieces and a lot of cash spending and Devontae Adams and Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler. And here we are with an 0-3 start. I think you can make an argument they could have at least 1 win there with the Arizona game. But what have you seen from this team so far that it's been such a disappointment? I know a lot of people made a big deal about Josh McDaniels had a meeting with Mark Davis after the game. I don't think people should take that too seriously. But overall, what are you seeing with this team so far?
Yeah, I mean, when you're top 5 in total guarantees given out to free agents, and that does not include Derek Carr, Max Crosby, and Hunter Renfrow getting massive new extensions, you hope not to start 0-3. I think the thing here is not that I'm trying to, pat myself on the back or anything, but when you kind of neglect some position groups, they've reared their ugly head. They have a very bad offensive line, and Derek Carr is one of the leaders right now in turnover-worthy plays, is 24th in PFF passing grade right now among quarterbacks that qualify. He hasn't been good, but he has not had a lot of time to maneuver, even with those weapons. And then their secondary also, a lot of folks kind of had questions, poked holes in it. They did trade for Rocky Sin, who's now hurt at the moment, but they've had some injuries there. They're just not super talented on the back end, and that has been the killer for them through 3 weeks.
It's been rough. I mean, again, you hate overreacting to this stuff. And the thing that we do a lot of radio hits all over the place. And one of the big topics that always came to me, at least, was the AFC West and how many teams are going to make the playoffs from that division. And I was like, I don't see more than 2 because first of all, the AFC is stacked. Second of all, these teams are going to beat up on each other. And we've already seen that, for example, in week 1, where the Chargers beat the Raiders, and they have a divisional game coming up this week against the Broncos, who, for all the hate and criticism that the Broncos have taken so far this year, I think the Raiders would gladly flip positions with them right now, who are 2-1. So it's been a rough start so far there in Las Vegas. But the other team that has been off to, I wouldn't say a bad start, but they're 1-2, is the Chargers. And the injuries have mounted up in a crazy pace, like it has almost every year for them, where you look at Justin Herbert with his ribs, Corey Linsley with his knee, Keenan Allen has the hamstring injury, and then you have the longer ones with Rashawn Slater's out for the year with his biceps injury. Joey Bosa has a groin injury. J.C. Jackson has an ankle injury. Even a smaller name like Jalen Guyton has a torn ACL. It's ramping up like crazy there in L.A. I guess let me just ask you this. At some point, do you wonder it's not bad luck? There's something deeper here going on with the Chargers.
I think it is fair to wonder at a certain point. We have talked in the past and written in the past at pff.com about how injuries are random to a degree, but that you can find some consistency. For example, the Rams have been extraordinarily healthy the last 5 or so years. Teams like the 49ers, the Ravens on the other end of the spectrum, but it tends to level out. But we talk about the same old Chargers and how things they never get this luck. At a certain point, maybe it isn't luck. And look, they have the same doctor in place now who pierced Tyrod Taylor's lung when trying to give him an injection. I'm not a doctor. You're not a doctor. We're not trying to tell anyone, how to do their jobs or if they're doing a good job. But you just start asking questions of, I don't know, is the practice facility, is the turf there safe? Like, you just start poking holes in every single thing you're doing because they just cannot catch a break when it comes to health.
And the thing is, you are right about the doctor still being there, but when Brandon Staley he came from the Rams, and one of the things, like you mentioned, the Rams have been really good with their injuries. He actually made attempts to change some things around there when it comes to the conditioning and stuff like that. Clearly has not worked so far. I do think people did not. I mean, it was talked about, but not talked about enough. The Tyrod Taylor element to what happened with Justin Herbert this week, because the whole thing about taking an injection actually went down to the wire with him. I'm still not sure if he actually ended up taking. Was there any news on that? Did he end up taking the injection?
It's a good question because I remember hearing how he was kind of on the fence about it. He didn't look great. He didn't look terrible either. That's an interesting question for sure.
I don't think the news ever came out because I know he was on the fence about it. And I don't think, I'm not sure what ended up happening. He did play the full game despite a blowout, and now they are here at 1-2 and dealing with all those injuries that we just mentioned. Let's talk about the team that they just lost to, and that is the Jacksonville Jaguars, who, I mean, for people who watch the show, I probably talked about the Jaguars a little bit too much this offseason, but that was really because I thought this team could be competitive. And I said that the hiring of Doug Peterson was the best move made this offseason. Again, we're only through 3 weeks, but is it fair to ask, are the Jaguars a real contender in this AFC South division?
I think it totally is, and I also think your Doug Peterson point it was spot on. It's little things that you notice in that Chargers game where there was a fourth down. I want to say a 4th and 5, where the team was lined up and ready to snap the ball with about 20 seconds left on the play clock. Like these little details you notice where they're just so organized. Guys are in place where they're supposed to be that you didn't see last year with Urban Meyer, to say the very least. So it's so much different. Trevor Lawrence looks calm, cool, and collected. But no, they're a legit team. They are top 5 on both offense and defense in expected points added per play, kind of an advanced measure of just, what down they're letting up their yards and kind of take situational factors into consideration. They're a top 5 on both sides of the ball. And that AFC South with the Colts and Titans and Texans, not a good division. I think there's still plus money to bet to win the division. I don't think it's a bad bet.
I don't think it is either. And you look at their 2 first-round picks from this year. Trayvon Walker has been playing really well. Devin Lloyd, the other one, who I don't think people are talking about, has been all over the place on the field. He has been phenomenal as well. We talked about a lot this offseason about the overspending that the Jaguars did. If the Jaguars could become good this year, they eventually become a team where you don't have to overspend and people want to come to play for you, like we sort of saw this offseason with Joe Burrow, where Lael Collins wanted to come there, Alex Kappa wanted to come there, Ted Karras wanted to come there. If they're able to become a good enough team, players will want to come to Jacksonville and play for Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence. And Doug Peterson this week returns to Philadelphia, his first time going back there, playing against those undefeated Eagles that we just talked about. That should be a great matchup. Let's talk a little bit more about the Eagles. We really didn't talk enough about them. They have been awesome so far. The only concern that I had coming into the year, we talked about this on our other shows, PFF at Night, was that when they had those 10 wins last year, the final 7 were all against really bad teams. So I was like, okay, let's see how they do against some real competition. So far, they've been pretty good. And I got to say, Jalen Hurts has been improving at every possible place where people were concerned about, whether it was pocket pressing, his accuracy, his anticipation. He has shown that he's able to take his game to the next level, and the Eagles look like they're a real team over here.
They absolutely do. There's one other team that is also top 5 on offense and defense and EPA per play. That is the Philadelphia Eagles. They have looked the part, no question about it. Trading for A.J. Brown was a slam dunk move already. He has been as advertised and is worth every penny that they spent on him. But yeah, Jalen Hurts has taken those steps. It all was going to come down to him. We all knew that. Can he take the next step and become, a consistent pocket passer on top of his look? He's still one of the better rushers as a quarterback in the NFL. I want to say he's averaging 12 carries a game. It's like by far the most of any quarterback, but he's also delivering the ball with his arm in critical moments against better defenses. And they're also, even though, maybe some of the scores have been close, the Detroit score was close, was not a particularly close game. The Minnesota game was a blowout. If you watch that game, you thought Minnesota was never going to win that game from the moment they snapped the ball. So they are a scary, scary team in that NFC East.
The thing about Hurts is that the stuff that he is improving at, I mentioned it before, are stuff that quarterbacks usually don't improve on right away, especially. I mean, we saw it with Josh Allen, I guess, for example, but we don't see it that often. And here we are seeing it with Jalen Hurts, the other person there in that offense who really wasn't involved in week 1 was Devontae Smith. And here he is in the last couple of weeks, has really showed out, was amazing in that first half against Washington this past week. You mentioned the whole thing about paying a receiver like AJ Brown, how much of a slam dunk he has been. Sticking in the NFC East, the Kenny Golladay situation has been an abstract disaster in New York. I mean, there's no other way of saying it. Before we get into it, this past game, he obviously had no catches again, had 2 drops. This is what he told the media before that game about not playing much in week 2, and this is what he had to tell them. Here it is.
Accepted the role. I mean, do you accept this?
I mean, I really didn't have a choice. Like I said, I don't agree with it.
Kenny,
Bottom line is,
do you think you've earned, if you're on the field every day and other people aren't, do you think you should be earning more playing time because you're putting the time in and out there?
I should be playing regardless.
All right. I should be playing regardless was what he said. He did get some more playing time in week 3. It did not go over well on Monday night. There was boos raining down at MetLife Stadium. Brad, what do the Giants do from here? Sterling Shepard goes down. He was one of those receivers who looked like Brian Daboll bought into. Clearly, Kenny Golladay is not one of those guys. What's the plan over here? Because I know people are talking about trade. I think moving on from him would be a very difficult task for this front office. What goes down over here?
Yeah, I mean, first you mentioned Sterling Shepard, who's leading the team in targets and receiving yards, coming off a torn Achilles in Week 15 last year, and was already the number 1 guy. Such an unfortunate injury to tear his ACL in the last play of that game against Dallas. So I think that first is maybe a factor to where if you were more open to moving Kenny Golladay, maybe now you're a bit more hesitant because you just lost Shepard. But, Kadarius Toney did not play Week 3. Wan'Dale Robinson, their second-round rookie, did not play Week 2 or Week 3. So you'll get those guys back at some point. I still think they're going to try to move him. They probably have been shopping him for a while now. The issue I was told was more so about next year, where he already has a $4.5 million fully guaranteed roster bonus for next season. So even if New York could do what the Denver Broncos did last year when they traded Von Miller, where they basically converted all the salary into a bonus, therefore the Rams paid Von Miller about $500,000 last year, the Giants could do the same thing. The issue is that acquiring team would be on the hook for that fully guaranteed roster bonus. I was told that makes the pool of teams that could be interested go down to a very, very small number.
Right. I mean, the thing over here is do the Giants still put him on the field? Does this get to a point where it's like, you know what, we'll let you stay away from the team for the rest of the year? Because clearly what I understood also from the Brian Daboll offense is that Sterling Shepard, for example, understands what to do. David Sills got it. Kenny Golladay, where it comes to being where you're supposed to be on the field. For example, one of those drops, the earlier ones, he was not in the right spot, was what it was explained to me. So it looks like he's just not even understanding what's going on in the offense, which is a bigger problem here. Does it get to a point where we're like, you know what, we'll pay you your money. After the year, we'll move on from you, but we don't want to risk the potential injury where your money does become fully guaranteed next year as well?
It's a great question. I mean, if he's already behind guys like Richie James and David Sills, and zero disrespect to either of those players, but I mean, undrafted guys that have basically been bouncing around practice squads for the first couple of years of their careers, or for Sills, I think he's been on the Giants practice squad for several years now. But nevertheless, if you're already behind those guys in the pecking order, and I mentioned you have 2, a first round and second round pick that are not healthy and getting healthy, maybe that is the route they go. Or again, like you'd say, maybe it's an Odell Beckham Jr. situation where you just basically make it as easy as possible for both parties. I think the question there is, would Kenny Golladay rather just collect some checks and just sit back, which, hey, all power to him. He earned it when he got it. And I think that might be, unlike Odell, who I think would do whatever it took to get out, go play somewhere else, go be with his friend Von Miller in L.A. I don't know if Kenny Golladay has the same motivation.
Yep. 19 games, no touchdowns, has not worked out there in New York. We'll see what ends up happening. But again, it was the previous regime that did this. So I guess Joe Shane has an easy way of just getting out of it eventually when the time comes. But as we've said multiple times, he walked into an absolute disaster salary cap wise. And Kenny Golladay is definitely one of those bad contracts there on the roster. Let's stick with the NFC East here again and go to the Dallas Cowboys, a team that just beat the Giants on Monday Night Football. Cooper Rush has been getting the job done. I mean, the defense has been pretty good. I think both of us had our panic level after week 1 was a bit high. Where are we right now, Brad?
That's a good point. I guess maybe we did overreact as much as we try not to. They've now won 2 games in a row, including a game over the Cincinnati Bengals. I think the thing with Cooper Rush, and I talked about this earlier today, but I want to see what the team has been doing for Cooper Rush, which is a ton of play action, a lot of motion, a lot of just very schemed open, easy throws. Do that with Dak as well. I get Dak is better, and you want him to be able to just drop back and as a pure drop back passer to go through his progression, find the open man, and be productive, but also give him some more of those easy, schemed open plays. No, they've been good, though. I mean, the offensive line, losing Tyron Smith and rookie Tyler Smith sliding into left tackle and looking the part. He is great in space, clearing rushing lanes. Jason Peters, guy is incredible, looked good at left guard, rotating with Matt Farniok, and was, in my opinion, clearly the better left guard at 40 years old with about 3 weeks of practice under his belt. So panic button not quite hit yet. Their defense is so legit, though. That front seven is really, really talented, playing good football. It's going to come down to them and the Eagles, and I guess the Cowboys are right back in the mix.
They are. We're going to put up the screen over here. This is their schedule coming up over here. They have the Commanders this week, the Rams after that, and the Eagles in week 6 on Sunday Night Football. Dak Prescott said week 5 is when he thinks he could come back. It sounds like week 6 is more realistic. They're very much in the thick of things right now there in the NFC East. And it's, again, I mean, Jerry Jones has been saying a lot of crazy stuff, but I mean, I guess give him some credit. Cooper Rush has been playing pretty well, but I think we all understand that whenever Dak Prescott is healthy, he'll be the quarterback whenever that time comes. Let's go back to the AFC West. We started the show here with the AFC West. The Denver Broncos, we talked about them a little bit there in the beginning. This happened earlier in the week before the game, but the Nathaniel Hackett going out and getting help with the game day decisions. They hired former Ravens assistant head coach Jerry Rosburg to do that. I don't know how much thought you given this, but I don't know how people talked about this, but I respect that decision a lot. They identified a problem, they put ego to the side, and they made a big hire. And again, they're 2-1 right now, in a much better position than the Raiders, for example. Have you given that decision a little bit of thought, and how much of a doing that as a coach, and again, putting ego to the side? I just have a lot of respect for it. What do you think about that decision?
No, I'm with you 100%. I have a ton of respect for it. It can be tough for these guys sometimes to admit their deficiencies. And if you're going to be a head coach that does call plays on either side of the football, that makes the situational stuff, the timeouts, the going for it, all those things becomes that much more difficult to have that on your plate as well. So, he deserves credit for it. Hopefully they clean that up. And, he understands. Obviously, he does understand they've kind of left a lot of, meat on the bone, a lot of plays on the field. I know as of right now, they've left the most win probability on 4th down decisions per, our models, here at PFF. They've left a lot of plays on the field, and they have not been good on offense. So you have to commend a guy for doing that, because, some coaches, their ego would not let them admit they need help.
Yeah, definitely. And the other thing that I guess, seen with the Broncos that I hate using the word concerned, but Russell Wilson has not looked like Russell Wilson. I guess that final drive he did. But is there a level of, okay, what is going on over here with Russell Wilson? Why is this going on right now? Or are you one of those people? I know you're not, because I've heard you talk about this in the past, but new coaching staff, no preseason games, not putting him out there. Could there be an element of rust with a new team and new coaching staff? What do you think is going on over there with them?
I think there probably is, and so we shouldn't overreact, but I still would say I think this is kind of the trickiness with a Russell Wilson, is that because he's so boom or bust, where he gets, those big splash plays, those incredible teardrop downfield passes he creates by scrambling for 4 or 5 seconds in the backfield and running around like crazy, then making those splash plays. That's kind of carried him throughout his entire career. He's not a guy that just drop back and hits 8-yard passes and just, kind of moves down the field. He needs those explosives to carry him. He has not done that. He has not really been dancing around in the pocket. He has not really been finding his guys deep downfield. I mean, Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy have made some nice plays. But, there is a concern level there, because I think we're seeing this shift to more too high defenses, which is too high safeties playing in the alleys, and he wins on the outside. He does not throw over the middle. Historically, his heat map is ice cold blue in the middle, and it's fiery red on the outside, where he throws to DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett and all these guys. The new age NFL defense that was created to stop guys like him and Patrick Mahomes and yada yada is a terrible, thing for teams to do against him, because it's what he struggles with.
That's an interesting point that I don't think people. I would love to see that map. Do we have that map somewhere? Can we find that and post it somewhere? Because it's definitely a great point. The other thing about the Broncos that I will mention is that they're doing it right now without Justin Simmons, who is definitely their defensive leader. Tim Patrick went down in training camp, who I heard is someone who built really good chemistry with Russell Wilson since he got there to Denver. And then Quinn Miners up front is one of the guards that they are very high on. He has not played as well so far for the most part, and they expect him to come back sooner than later. So whenever that does happen, they're expecting to definitely turn things around there. Like we've mentioned a few times here in the podcast, being at 2-1 is definitely a big plus for them considering the circumstances. Let me go over to Lamar Jackson and the Ravens because we talked a lot about him throughout the offseason about his contract and what's going to happen. He's betting on himself through 3 games. He has been one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, playing, I wouldn't say like 2019 Lamar, because I think that year was unreal, but as close as he could possibly get to it right now. I guess I'm jumping very ahead right now, but if he continues to do this and if he doesn't get hurt, and of course we've seen the Mac Jones injury, we've seen the Trey Lance injury, it could happen at any time, but the leverage for Lamar Jackson come this time next year or come the offseason is where with him because he'll be going into franchise tags.
There is actually a clip going around right now of Jalen Ramsey and Bobby Wagner, 2 Rams teammates now, talking about how much leverage they think Lamar Jackson has. And Ramsey, who had plenty of leverage in his own right, got traded for 2 first-round picks, became the highest-paid cornerback in the NFL, said he has all the leverage. I don't think people understand when we're game planning for the Baltimore Ravens, it's all about Lamar Jackson. He does everything for this football team. He is so important to what they do. You look at his numbers. I understand not wanting to compare to 2019 as you should. He was an MVP. They're right there. I mean, he is 3rd in yards per attempt at 8.5 yards per attempt and 1st in the NFL in yards per carry at 9.3. Not among quarterbacks, among all players. The most efficient play in the NFL right now is giving the ball to Lamar Jackson. He also has accounted for 12 touchdowns. The only other team in the NFL that has scored 12 touchdowns is the Detroit Lions. So Lamar Jackson is 1st in touchdowns, 3rd in yards per attempt, 1st in yards per carry. He is, he bet on himself, and right now I think the leverage is 110% in his favor.
It's going to be fascinating to see if this keeps on going. I saw a great stat yesterday. If you take away, and it's a fantasy stat, but if you take away all of Lamar Jackson's rushing numbers, he would still be quarterback 5 in standard fantasy scoring. If you take away all of Lamar Jackson's passing numbers, he'll be running back 11 in standard fantasy scoring. So the guy he's unreal. He's carrying that team. That defense, by the way, which we all really were high on, has not been playing well so far to start this year. They have gotten some turnovers in key times, but overall has not been great. It will be interesting to see how they do. But the Lamar situation, I'm telling you right now, if this keeps on going, it's definitely one of the most fascinating quarterback situations we've had in a very long time. A couple more things before I wrap this up. The New Orleans Saints, we knew about them coming into this year. No Sean Payton, how will that be? But the roster is still pretty good. They have a pretty good argument that they should be 0-3 right now. They're playing in London this week against the Vikings, early game there, 9 a.m. on the East Coast. But what is going on with the Saints right now, Brad?
Yeah, not only 0-3, but they should have lost to every team in their own division. They had the 16-point comeback against the Atlanta Falcons, just pulling a classic Falcons in week 1. But I think the thing with them is they're just not doing anything easy. Jameis Winston, 12-yard average depth of target is by far the top mark in the NFL, meaning he's throwing deep so often and just not checking it down. Alvin Kamara, who is a top 10 graded receiving running back for us the last 3 seasons, has done almost nothing in that capacity, is a little bit banged up with injuries. And then now Jarvis Landry and Michael Thomas did not practice today. They're hurt as well. Rookie Chris Olave has been awesome and been dynamic. Has 268 receiving yards through his first 3 weeks, which is tops in NFL history for a rookie. But, yeah, they're just not really doing anything easy. And the second thing is we're starting to finally see on defense. It's still a good defensive unit. But, look, Cam Jordan has missed 1 game in his career for like 11 seasons. And he's like a 33-year-old edge rusher. He hasn't been incredible. Marcus Davenport, their young, fifth-year option player, has been okay. They just haven't won in some of the ways they have in the past. I'm not panicking there either. But I think the loss of Sean Payton, even though Pete Carmichael, the offensive coordinator, was there the entire time as Sean Payton as well, he's not scheming up anything easy for Jameis Winston. They've kind of had to have some miracle plays just to be in some of these games.
Yeah, I mean it's weird because I don't think people I don't know. The week 1 game against the Falcons, I mean, the comeback just happened so fast that we just expected them to win, and it happened. And then these next 2 games, they lose. And then this last game to the Panthers where they lost was like, okay, what's going on over here? I guess you kind of laid it all out there, but here they go this week. They have the Vikings in London. And I don't know if you saw their injury report for this week. You mentioned a couple of them there. They have like 11 players on their injury report this week, and a lot of key players. The Vikings have 0. So going into this game, they are banged up a lot. And again, going to London, that flight, a lot of teams will tell you, is not a flight that people look forward to. And the Saints are one of those teams, if I'm not mistaken, they opted not to take a bye after London as well. So probably not a smart decision looking at it right now, considering all the injuries they have and the start that they've been off to this year. Last thing I want to hit on, we talked about the Dolphins to start this episode and their 3-0 start. They play on Thursday night. I guess a fairly straightforward question. How do you feel about Tu'a? Are you buying into all of this, or is it more just the offense?
It's more the offense. I don't want to always detract. I'm willing to change my mind. I'm willing to be wrong. But he's still, you watch the tape. I mean, he does not have a lot of velocity, a lot of zip on some of these throws. He has still thrown a lot of turnover-worthy plays and also has interceptions as well. He's playing well. He's on time. He's often accurate. He's a good anticipatory thrower. But he's not the reason that they're scoring, all these points in the fourth quarter. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are. And again, he's the one delivering the ball. I'm not trying to say he's bad, but I'm not, now Tua should get extended and he's as good as Herbert and Burrow. Like, no, those thoughts are not happening in my head, but all the credit to him and also credit to Mike McDaniel. They lead the NFL right now in play action, in motion on pre-snap. They're doing all the things that confuse opposing defenses and show all their shiny gadgets and all their toys they've acquired and make things easy. And it's been working very, very well.
I mentioned this last week, and I'm glad you said that, because the knock on Tua when he came into the league was that in Alabama, he had all these great receivers. That was one of the main reasons why he was so good, right? You had Henry Ruggs, Jerry Jeudy, and the response was that's not going to happen in the NFL. I guess it could happen in the NFL when you have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and all these speedy guys. So it has been happening. Again, we don't want to knock him or anything, but I want to see it continue happening here as we move forward. The last thing I want to ask you is just quickly, and I know this probably isn't your level of stuff. You're more into like the news and salary cap and everything, but the way the concussion thing happened on Sunday, how did you feel about that? Because I guess they quickly were able to put out there that it's a back thing, but they were the ones who actually went out there and said it was a head thing. So like, I guess your overall thoughts on how all of that transpired on Sunday.
It was weird because he was kind of wobbly as he was walking off the field after he kind of snapped his head back. And so it looked like a head issue. Then he goes in the tunnel and it was almost halftime. So we just stayed in there throughout halftime. And then you see him trot out for the second half. I get why the NFLPA decided to launch an investigation into the situation. I just saw right before I came on, though, that they said early indications are Miami followed every, part of the procedure and protocol to the T, and that they have no evidence right now anything was done incorrectly. I would say this, though. I'm glad that there is a governing body that can go in and back check these things. There have been too many instances where guys are allowed back into football games, and then we find out the day later or even that night that they actually were in reality concussed and somehow, passed the test. So it was a little weird, a little bit fishy. His back seems like a real problem. He honestly may not play Thursday. There's optimism, but it's not 100%. But yeah, long answer short, it was a little strange, but we should be happy that they can't just bury these things any longer, that now there's other parties involved that can kind of oversee situations like this.
Yeah, I do think it's important to mention where the NFL has come to when it comes to concussions. I mean, they started from like the very bottom, like they were at Congress and everything. I mean, it was pretty bad at one point, but I think they have taken some significant steps to get better. It just felt very, again, as you said, it was very fishy and odd the way it all transpired on Sunday. And my initial thought was, okay, it's a concussion. They're playing on Thursday. He's probably out for Thursday as well. I guess now there is an avenue for him to play on Thursday night, assuming the back and the other injuries he have do not count him out. But it was just weird. And I guess like the average fan and those, I guess people who are watching the NFL and are like, I know I'm going into a bit of a deeper level, but those mothers who watch and everything like, oh, do I want my son to watch this? The NFL doesn't like seeing that happen on the field, and to have him back on the field is definitely something they don't want to see. So that's the way my head went to, but overall, it seems like he could possibly end up playing on Thursday night. And the Dolphins have said it was more of a back thing than a concussion thing. All right, Brad, I want to thank you for coming on once again. Everyone can follow you on Twitter. It is at PFF_Brad. We'll be back once again here next week with another great episode, another great guest, and a lot more great football. I think we just put out a stat on Twitter. The NFL is off to their best start so far in terms of viewership. 17 million viewers per game through 3 weeks. The best start to the season since 2016. I think a lot of it goes to the games. Probably gambling as well, fantasy as well, but also just the games itself so far have been all amazing to start the year. So we'll be back again next week. See you then.